Champaign County Agriculture Today with your host, Dennis Riggs.
Hi, and welcome back to Champaign County Agriculture Today. I'm Dennis Riggs, your host for the next half hour as we talk about Champaign County's most important industry, agriculture. We thank you for tuning in and hope you'll stay with us for the next few minutes as we talk about some issues that are very important to us who eat food 3 times a day, for the industry that grows food here in Champaign County, and for all of us who are concerned about the environment and the many different roles that it plays. I'm Dennis Riggs, your host for the program. I'm a farmer here in Champaign County, and today we have some great guests that I think will really bring a lot of information as we talk about the environment and conservation. So it should be a really good program. Hang on. Let me introduce our panelists for today. On my immediate left here is Steve Stierwalt. And Steve, you are the chairman of the Champaign County Soil and Water Conservation District and also a farmer here in Champaign County. Give me a little bit of history about yourself. How long have you been around Champaign County, Steve?
Well, Dennis, I've farmed in Champaign County all my life. I hate to think how many years that is now, but as you mentioned, I am the current chairman of the Soil and Water Conservation District, and we are the kind of the agricultural arm of pretty much of trying to help out with soil and water issues. We have a volunteer board that helps direct the conservation issues from our office. And,
I see.
And I also farm in the Sodorus area.
And that's been is it a family farm, or how long has the farm been in your family?
It is a family farm. My wife and my son are involved with the farm, and I don't know how many generations now. At least I guess I'm at least the 4th generation. So we've been in Champaign County for a while, and it's a good place to farm if you want to farm.
Very good. Well, next on our program is Brett Roberts, and Brett is the state conservation agronomist from the USDA Natural Resources. And Brett, tell us a little bit about yourself and your job over there at the USDA.
Yeah, I'm what they call an agronomist, and that's a person that specializes in crops and soils. And I work all over the state of Illinois. I've been working for the Natural Resources Conservation Service for over 18 years now, and I've worked in various places in the state, but I've been in this region for about 12 years.
Very good. Now, your office is located here in Champaign County?
That's correct.
All right. Very good. And last but not least, on our far left on there is Kevin Donahoe. And Kevin is our district conservationist for the Natural Resources Conservation Service here in Champaign County. Kevin, give a little bit of background, how long you've been in the county and what your job is.
Okay, thanks, Dennis. Basically, I've been in the county now for just about a year. In fact, just last week it was a year. But basically, I've been with the service similar time to what Brett's been. I started with the service in 1987. And my career has basically stayed in Illinois. I've been in about 5 different counties. Most recently, before Champaign County and Mason County, where fruit and vegetables are produced and irrigation is quite plentiful. But I enjoy, working with local producers and those trying to, conserve the environment and protect our natural resources.
We have some letters that we've been flashing around here, NRCS and SWCD. Kevin, I think I'll start out with you. Give us an idea, when we talk about NRCS, National Resources Conservation Service, give us an idea what that is and what that program's all about.
Well, you know that most folks who work with the government get accustomed to dealing with alphabet soup. There's quite a few acronyms that we throw around. NRCS across this country now means the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and I'd like to think that the name that we have for our agency describes exactly what we do, and that is basically to protect our natural resources and work with all those people who have some input into that.
Very good. Well, Steve, I'll come back to then you as chairman of the Champaign County Soil and Water. We talk about SWCD, Soil and Water Conservation District. Give us an idea of what the function of that agency is and who is that agency as far as the governmental involvement.
Well, the SWCD, the Soil and Water Conservation District, it's kind of a pseudo-governmental organization. We have no taxing authority, but we function as an elected board, and we also work with our partners in conservation, which are sitting here with us today, actually, and it's kind of an interesting mix in that. The idea of the Soil and Water Conservation District is to take local people who are involved in their community and to help direct conservation initiatives. We aren't the experts. We don't have the technical ability. We ask our partners to give us that technical help, but we help identify what's important to farmers and city people in our own area. And then direct those efforts.
And of course, that's exactly what this program is all about, is to let people know what we're doing, how we're doing it, and what some of the problems are out there. So we're trying something a little bit different today, gentlemen. We're going to go out on the street. We haven't tried this on our program today, but actually we caught up with some people out on the street, both students and individuals over on the University of Illinois Quad. We thought, well, we'll go there. That gives us a wide range of people, and we wanted to see what they were thinking about today's topics. So before we get started, we're going to take just a second and see what people out on the street are talking about as far as the environment and conservation, and then we'll see what that general public has to say about it.
What do farmers do to protect water?
I've heard that farmers dump unnecessary chemicals on the fields. Is this true?
I was wondering how come when farmers plant their crops, sometimes the corn stalks are still up and sometimes they're not.
Well, those were some excellent questions. So let's get right to work with our panelists and see what they have to say about these questions and more here on our program today. Well, first of all, Steve, as the pseudo farmer or the conservation person here that represents the farmers directly, how does farming affect our environment? I mean, we see the environment out there. People enjoy the weather. They see the fronts come through. How does farming affect the environment?
Well, as a farmer, I remember when I was young, we had a landlord in particular who did not live in this area, but one of the things that he said that struck me that stuck with me all this time is what he wanted to leave the land in better shape than when he first got it. And so as farmers, we are basically have an opportunity to use, for our lifetime, you might say, some of the best resource, some of the best farming land in the world. And the way I look at it, my job, for one thing, is to produce food and fiber, but also to leave that natural resource, hopefully in better shape than when I got it. And so that's what I think is important for us as farmers.
Land's been here for a long time. It's going to be here for a long time longer, right? Well, Kevin, I'm going to switch over to you and talk about how programs are helping farmers use conservation practices. Farming is different than it was 10, 15, 50 years ago. What type of practices are we talking about, and how does that help out?
Well, there are many practices that we have in our toolbox. And the toolbox is the term that we use to describe all the different programs and practices that we use to address natural resource concerns. Some that we may mention and use quite frequently are no-till, contouring, strip-till, grass waterways, some terracing. Generally, the lay of the land somewhat dictates what type of practices are needed and what practices will work better.
Mm-hmm. Brett, I'll switch over to you, and that's a good follow-up on Kevin's comments there. The practice that is used, and I think we've got a slide. We're going to slide number 1, which shows some conservation tillage going on. The land is actually who is in control of what practice is being used more than what the farmer just decides he wants. Is that correct?
That's correct. One of the things we try to do is use farming practices that minimize erosion, and one of the things that we try to do is make use of the previous year's fodder or crop residue, and by not tilling that up and burying it, it's left on the soil surface to protect it against hard packing raindrops that would tend to dislodge and carry away our soil.
In our first slide, we saw soybeans being planted in a conservation tillage operation. Let's go to slide number 2. In slide number 2, we take a look at corn being grown in a conservation method. Explain this picture and what's going on there.
Well, basically, that's a picture of emerging corn after it's emerged, and you can see that that crop was planted right into last year's soybean residue without any prior tillage. And so again, this allows the soil to have maximum protection and cover or mulch on it, if you will, that would protect it from raindrops. And there are also some side benefits that it sort of insulates the soil from the direct sun, and so it does have ability to conserve moisture, and it allows water to soak into the soil rather than run off.
Okay. Kevin, a no-till operation, you talk to a lot of farmers and advise them on their conservation practices. Why would a farmer decide that they'd want to use no-till on their farming operation?
Well, some of the very same points that Brett brought up are key and very critical. Erosion control is one, but also maintaining water quality. We know that water quality concerns are quite important, especially in this day and age. And by implementing just about every one of the practices that we have, we're affecting water quality in one way or another. Whether it's groundwater or surface water, we are affecting it. We have the potential to affect it. So application of sound conservation can only improve water quality.
We talked about no-till farming. Let's go back to slide number 3 for just a second. I believe we're going to call this one contour farming, or farming with the shape of the land. Kevin, you want to continue on and explain what's going on in this picture?
This particular example, I think, emphasizes the fact that the lay of the land plays a key role in what practices we choose. Of course, we're working and cooperating with the producers who are going to apply these practices, so we have to lay them out in such a way that it's still farmable while also maintaining the productivity of the land. And I think this is a great example of using no-till on the contour to, in effect, stop nearly all erosion on this cropland.
How long has technology been around that allows a farmer to do something like this? Back in the old days, we've seen the moldboard plow, we've seen a lot of different styles of farming. How long have we had this practice to pull out of the bag of tricks?
This practice has been around for a long time. However, the specific tools that we use to apply it have morphed over the years. They have changed. No-till planters, no-till drills have come a long way. And I think if you ask Steve that question, he'd probably give you the same answer, that the no-till technology has came a long way, and it makes the whole process of no-tilling much easier than it would have been 30 years ago.
Steve, let's go to that. That's a good follow-in there. How has equipment changed that allows a farmer to utilize this type of conservation resource as they till their fields?
Well, one of the problems we've always had in this part of the world is when we're trying to plant corn early in the year, our soils are naturally cold and damp. And one of the newer technologies, I guess, that's come along to help us with that problem is called strip tillage. Now, it still counts, you might say, as no-till, because what we're trying to do is keep the residue on the soil to protect the soil from raindrops so that it doesn't start to erode. But with strip tillage, we'll actually make a small strip that'll warm up quicker and will be drier in the spring, and it allows our corn to emerge with similar vigor, I guess you'd say, to the full tillage area. So we get just about all the benefits of, you might say, strict no-till, but we get the yield potential of more of a tillage situation. So it's a great practice, I think, in this area. So that is one of the newer technologies, that has come along that wasn't available back in our dad's day when they had to really plow everything to get the residue into to where they could handle it to actually grow a crop.
Brett, a lot of people watching our program today may be gardeners in their backyard and have a small amount of tillage that they do to grow a garden. How does this differ? Is it different growing crops in the tomatoes and the cucumbers in your backyard as compared to what the farmers are doing? You don't hear about strip till or contour tillage in the garden. How is this different for the people watching our program today?
Well, one of the things that's different with farmers is they have so much more land to cover. And so as we talked about the soil and water conservation benefits of no-till and strip-till, it also provides a tremendous fuel savings on the part of the farmers. So it also helps us reach energy sustainability. But quite frankly, even home gardeners can no-till also. They don't require specialized equipment and things like that. It's just a matter of them getting their garden soils in a good enough shape to where all they have to do is put their plants in, and then if the soil is friable and mellow, then the plants will root down whether or not there's been any tillage there at all.
We can zoom in with slide number 5 to a little bit closer look at the soil What's going on there as we take a closer look at strip tillage. Let's take a look at slide number 5. We'll put that up there and give us a little bit of an idea what's going on as far as the soil's involvement, just tilling that small area rather than the wider area.
Well, what's taking place there is that implement, as we said, it makes a narrow strip that tills the soil slightly, and it also makes a small little raised bed, which helps it to warm up a little better in the spring. At the same time, the farmer is able to fertilize for the next year's crop by placing that fertilizer below the soil surface. And by doing that fertilizer is protected from runoff. So not only do we protect our water resources from but we also have more efficiency in our fertilizer use. So that implement basically creates a small strip, and it's elevated some into a small little raised bed. And then what the farmer will do next spring, without any prior tillage at all, is they'll just go in there and plant directly on top that strip. They'll place their planters to where it actually places that seed right in that tilled strip. And because it's warmer and drier, that crop will emerge in much faster fashion than if it was covered completely by the residue, which tends to keep our soils cooler and wetter early in the spring.
Sounds like a good management tool and something that would really help out. Well, we're going to go on to slide number 7 because we're going to talk now about a whole different area called contour farming. We'll put up slide number 7, and Kevin, if you would, tell us what's going on here. Looks like this farmer can't plant rows very straight. What's the deal?
Well, once again, Dennis, this is a good example of how the land dictates what we can do. And basically, it appears like this particular producer is in basically a corn-soybean rotation, and he's using a couple practices at the same time. To the untrained eye, you may not see that, but basically he's, of course, using crop rotation, rotating back and forth between corn and soybeans, because you can see the previous year's crop residue within those soybean rows. But you also notice that they are crooked, they're not straight, and that's because they're following the contour of this hill. And you know, what this does is, in effect, controls erosion and maintains water quality by minimizing soil loss from this field while still allowing some tillage for aeration and weed control. And there are, of course, you know, some places where that's, you know, a good choice. Again, land dictates, you know, where the best practice, you know, will do the best job.
Well, what we're going to do now is zoom out just a little bit further with slide number 8. And Brett, I'm going to ask you, as we zoom out here to this shot, you can see more of a big picture here of what's going on. What can you tell by looking at this shot for conservation?
Basically, when you see those rows in these gentle curves, as Kevin mentioned, it goes with the lay of the land, what we call on the contour. So theoretically, each row or each crop row's on the same elevation point. And so as the land slope changes, so does the direction of the crop rows. And so what we accomplish by that is, number one, when water wants to begin running down that long slope there and therefore causing the soil to erode, each one of those rows acts like a miniature little dam. And then what it does is, instead of letting the water run straight down the hill, it diverts the water sideways. So that slows the water down, and then it causes the water to be deposited. And over where you see those rows coming together, there would be like a grass waterway there, and that row water would be directed to those waterways, and then preventing any further erosion or gully erosion that way.
Well, Steve, we're going to move on to slide number 9 here, and I'm going to ask you, as the chairman of the Soil and Water Conservation District, how many of these practices are going on right here in East Central Illinois? Are you seeing more, less? What's the trend right now? And as you can see, this is the big picture. This is way up high, and we're seeing that contour farming at its best.
The trend of using conservation practices is definitely increasing. Our soybeans, we are doing a very good job of no-tilling soybeans. We're way over half the soybeans in our county are now no-tilled, And we're working with some of the other practices also. And the slide you're referring to showing the contour isn't a big area for us here in Champaign County because we don't have a lot of these long slopes. But the other practices we've talked about, the strip till, no till, and nutrient management, one we haven't talked about, are very, very important to us here in the county.
We're going to move on to slide number 10 because as it rains, and Brett, I think you talked about this a little bit ago, that water has to go somewhere. I mean, it just doesn't all soak in, so there's some surface drainage. In slide number 10, we're going to take a look at a waterway here in a Champaign County location. What's going on here? What's that grass on the side? Somebody need to mow that, or what's going on?
Well, basically, that's what we call a vegetative filter strip, and that's along, say, a stream or a drainage ditch where the surface runoff from the fields would flow into, and that strip there basically filters that runoff. So it's another barrier for us to clean the water up before it gets into the stream. And so by water flowing through that dense vegetation, we are able to filter out a lot of any suspended sediment that might still be in the water, in the runoff water, and so basically the water is going to be cleaner as it goes into the stream. And the side benefit of that vegetation is that it also provides some wildlife habitat for, like, say, for example, songbirds and ringneck pheasants.
Mm-hmm. Well, not only is it good looking, it's doing a job out there. That filter strip is more than just a good looking piece of land. Let's move along to slide number 11. And Kevin, I know you get involved in helping farmers plan how to implement this practice on their farms. How does that process work?
Well, basically, anytime a cooperator is willing to apply some conservation practice, they can stop in the office and we can talk about it. The next step would be to just determine what type of practices that it is that they may want to apply, and take a look at maps and go out to the field and get a first-hand view of what the situation is, and again, reach into our toolbox and pull out the right tool to address that need. And the conservation need here again, in this case, may be a filter strip along a creek or a ditch or some other stream, basically to protect water quality and to provide wildlife habitat as well. So we can do more than one thing with one practice.
Well, we've seen the drainage ditches in the last, and when we talk about drainage, we're talking about moving the surface water down away from the fields so they don't pond. As we go to slide number 12, this shows an area that's grass, as we talked about before, but there's no stream in the middle. So Kevin, I'm going to follow up with you. What is going on? What's this? It's not a stream. What is that?
This is what we call a grassed waterway, and the name pretty much says it all. This is where the water runs to and continues down between these two cornfields to ultimately find its outlet. The outlet may be a large stream or a creek, or it may be a smaller tributary, but basically, again, the point here is to control erosion, and in this case, you can see it had not been mowed, so we have tall vegetation there that can allow for wildlife habitat, and again to safely allow for the water to leave the field, all those fields without causing any damage.
Well, Brett, there's been a lot of talk here today about all of these different practices and things that we're implementing on our farms. Is it making a difference? Are we able to measure that we are making a difference as far as conservation of our clean water resources and our soil?
Yeah, it's making a tremendous amount of difference, because if you look at the trends in just basically average soil loss rates, that from any time period that you want to look for, say like from say the 60s to present, we've gradually over time by progressively implementing these practices, we've overall tremendously reduced the average soil erosion on an acre of soil in our farmland, not only in our state but in the whole country.
Mm-hmm. Steve, what do you see on a county level? We're going to move on to slide 13. This one shows a grass waterway, as we've talked about before, but without the tall crop on each side. You got a little bit better idea of what that grass waterway looks like. Are you seeing farmers adopt this here in Champaign County in East Central Illinois?
Grass waterways are well adapted to the problems we have here in Champaign County. If you have a large rain event, you'll have surface flow, And what we found with the grass waterway, that grass has a nice fibrous root system that will help hold the soil. And so when you'll put these grass waterways into areas where you know surface water is going to run in a big rain event. And so farmers are the ones that know their land very well, and they'll know where those problems are. And again, with the technical assistance that comes through some of the partners that have that technical know-how, they can help design and build these structures like a grass waterway that help protect the soil.
Kevin, I'll throw it back over to you. As we put all these things in place, are we seeing the farmers are able to conserve things other than just the soil? I'm talking seed, fertilizer, crop protection chemicals. Are there any side benefits to that area?
Yeah, all of the above. Basically, it's really a win-win situation for everyone, because anytime that you're using sound conservation practices and implementing those practices on your land, you have that impact. You can reduce herbicide usage, you can reduce fuel consumption, and you're going to protect the environment by reducing soil loss as well.
Well, you know, a lot of our people today, maybe the only chance they get to see practices like this in place is they're driving through the highways, you know, the interstates and the state routes from one end of the state to the other. Brett, what are the things that they should look for? And we've mentioned several of them and shown pictures. Are there any other things out there that the consumer could look at and get an idea of how farmers are conserving their soil and water resources?
Yeah, another common practice that you see in other parts of the state, and as you go along the state's highways and byways, you'll see little ridges that humps, if you will. We call them terraces, and what those do is they act like miniature little dams, and they can recognize those because typically they pond water and then they slowly release that water slowly into an underground tile system. And the way that water gets into those tiles is what we call a vertical pipe sticking out of the ground, and they're usually orange. So if you see one of those are usually where you have what we call a parallel tile outlet terrace system.
Well, there's a lot of progress being made every day. Steve, what's the future bring for a farmer? What can we look for? You see more practices going, more coordination between the agencies. Where do you predict the future is going to go, real quickly in our last few seconds here?
Well, I think the future's exciting. There's a win whenever we can keep the soil where it's supposed to be. That keeps our fertilizer where we want it. It keeps it out of our waterway. It keeps it's a good thing for all of us. If we can keep the soil where it needs to be, it helps with water quality, it helps with everything that we need to do as farmers.
Well, and of course, that's why we're here today, and I appreciate you gentlemen taking your time out as we tell the folks here in Champaign County and East Central Illinois about what's being done by the farmer and the agencies that support the farmer as far as being able to hold our soil resources, our water resources in place. And we thank you for listening today. We'd like to encourage you to tune in the future. We'll be doing several of these programs talking about environment, conservation, and different tillage practices. So until the next time, we encourage you to stay tuned here to this station. I'd like to thank my guests for stopping by today. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here and sharing your information with us today.
Thank you.
My name is Dennis Riggs, once again, your host for the program. This is Champaign County Agriculture Today, and we thank you for listening.
Champaign County Agriculture Today is brought to you by Champaign County Farm Bureau.